the great privilege of doing work with Professor Robert Thompson before and writing a paper with him and also being his student. He used to say, you cannot define risk without reference to your liabilities. If you define your assets equal to your liabilities, you're going to have a very different answer to if you define risk as not getting a particular level of income. So in other words, actuarial risk, the risk of not getting your goal or your objective or your liability, must be the chances of not being able to meet a particular level of income. So with that, we distinguish between meaningful and important information. So this was a poll question. It was about you getting a statement, and it tells you in your statement that you have R1 million. What would you do with that? This is a retirement fund statement. What would you do with that information? Would you, one, have no idea what level of income you will likely receive in retirement? Two, have some idea what the likely level of income you will receive, but not enough confidence to make big decisions? Or three, a very good idea? Or four, woohoo, R1 million. Now, I'm not going to ask you the question now because I don't have it, and I'm not going to count the hands in the room. But this is the type of thing that we place on our members. We have a situation where we provide them with fund credits, we provide them with investment returns, and somehow they're meant to decipher the information to be able to know what to do with it. When we provide members with the back history of a particular fund and say, you know, the past isn't a guide to the future, but I've given them 2-3 funds, and one has got a much higher return than the other two, sure, I've put the caveat out there, but can I really blame them if they go and choose the one with the highest return? So in our example, Lindiwe is 55, she's just received a statement, she has R1 million, and her normal retirement age is 65. And she believes that she is on track for a great retirement. Why? Because R1 million sounds like a lot of money. Hold on. Trying to go back to my Austin Powers image over here. There we go. R1 million sounds like a lot of money. And we can't blame her because it is more money than you're used to seeing or being able to have access to. But the reality is knowing that that account balance provides Lindiwe with no real insight into her standard of living in retirement. This is the standard market practice. And in fact, we might actually be encouraging undesirable member behavior, because if she is 10 years from retirement and potentially there is another job on offer somewhere else, she may be tempted to access 50,000, 100,000 Rand when she moves on and not preserving the full fund credit, because at the end of the day, what is the real difference to Lindiwe between 950,000 or R1 million? Of course, we know that that's quite significant, especially when we take compounding into account for another 10 years, but 50,000 at that point doesn't really show the destruction of value that she might have, and in fact, she may feel that it's quite reasonable because she uses it to fund other expenses like education or a car. So the DC members do have a liability, and that is the provision of an income that will allow the member to have that reasonable standard of living in retirement. It should increase annually with inflation, and it should be payable for as long as the member is alive. Now, we know that an inflation-linked annuity is the only financial product that will mitigate those three risks. The investment risk, we know what we're going to get. It's that same level of income each month. It will increase every single year with inflation, and as long as our member is alive, they will continue to receive the payment. So we argue that it is an appropriate default in terms of looking at the strategy and what you could do in terms of the income. Now, we actually have a market value that can be determined with reference to the cost of purchasing that income stream. And this is a key feature of the South African market, and one that we shouldn't take for granted. There are a lot of thriving retirement systems around the world where there is no developed annuity market, much as there may be first world economies. And so we're actually able to go out into the market and see what would the cost of providing a certain level of income be. So if we had a member who was 65 years old at the age and was retiring at the end of 2009, and needed 6,500 Rand a month, increasing with inflation for as long as they were alive, they could have gone out into the market and with R1 million purchased that income stream. So in terms of our liability assessment, our members' liability is R1 million because the goal is 6,500 Rand in inflation-linked income. At the end of 2009, 1 million would buy you 6,500, At the end of 2014, 1 million could buy you approximately 4,650 rands in terms of income, a deterioration of about 30% over the period. And that's not taking into account the inflation differential. That's simply what does 1 million rand buy you in level income. And you can see the deterioration over time. We know that that reason is because annuities became more expensive as interest rates fell. And the key point that we take from this is that your retirement objective cannot be met by setting a fund credit threshold as an objective or a goal. You can't know that for every 100,000 rand you save, you will get 650 rands worth of income. So by establishing an inflation-linked income goal and knowing how we can price it, it also has very big implications for the risk-free assets in terms of the savings of this member. Inflation-linked instruments now become the basis for the member's risk-free assets. Now, what you'd like to be able to purchase is potentially a deferred inflation-linked annuity. Lindiwe, age 55, retiring in 10 years, can potentially want to guarantee or secure a level of income in 10 years. But today, as we know it, I don't believe that you're able to buy such annuity contracts. The reality, though, is that it's possible to create a replicating portfolio of the right inflation-linked bonds that will actually track it. In fact, Professor Merton's work was on the Black-Scholes model, but not on the actual derivation of the formula, but actually showing that you could price the derivative contract by using a replicating portfolio. So if you've established the deferred inflation-linked annuity as the goal, there is a portfolio for the risk-free assets that will actually track, in theory, the cost of what that might be. So now we'll take the example of Robert. 1 year from retirement, he has sufficient assets to purchase his retirement income stream of 10,000 rand. Goes to the insurer, says to the insurer, this is the money I have, what can I buy? They say, you could purchase 10,000 rand. Robert thinks to himself, I'd like to work 1 more year. I'm feeling fit, I've got colleagues who like me, I feel I can make a difference, and at the end of the day, I'd like to actually have a little bit more to retire, maybe a little bit more than 10,000 rand. In DB terms, we would say that Robert is 100% funded because he has assets equals to liabilities, liability being equal to the cost of providing the income he needs. We then say, okay, your low-risk strategy, because Robert is conservative now, we'll show you 3 different strategies. The first one is what a lot of members get put into 1 year before retirement when they say that they are conservative. We put them in cash. The other one is what a lot of strategies have, which is a conservative nominal bond portfolio. As a strategy. And the third one is that bespoke inflation-linked bond portfolio. If we look at the return stream, the orange line shows you over various rolling 1-year periods from the end of 2007 right through to a period in 2015, what return you could get on a cash portfolio. And we can see it's pretty stable, about 5%, very little chance of not getting or at least you know that your principal has been preserved, and that whatever Robert had at the beginning of the year, he's got at least more in nominal terms. The blue line shows you the fixed income nominal bonds, and it's a little bit volatile. It does go negative at some points, but largely it delivers positive returns. And then we have the risk-free portfolio, or what we've called the risk-free portfolio. It's got inflation-linked bonds. It gives you a minus 10% at some point, a return that a member would be very cross with and potentially go and look for every trustee on their board if they receive that. Now, what we then look at doing is say, Robert returns to the insurer 1 year later and says, Mr. Insurer, I've returned. I'd like to pick up my 10,000 rand plus, please. And the insurer turns around and says, I'm sorry, Robert, you cannot get 10,000 rand. We've got a little bit less for you. At some point, in fact, with the cash portfolio, you've got 8,600 rand. With the all bond portfolio, you've got 8,669. And in fact, 60% of the time in both situations, you've got less than the 10,000. And Robert says, well, how did that happen? I was meant to be in the conservative portfolio option that was chosen for me by my fund. It was cash. And we turn around and say, well, didn't you look? That had a tracking error of 7.9 or an information ratio of minus 0.3, and all of these sorts of stats, that standard deviation I should have put there. But the reality is that what we should have been looking at is actually looking at what is the type of income deterioration that could happen through that time. And that is because cash is not the risk-free asset when you are defining the goal as providing an inflation-linked income in retirement. It was risk-free when we were looking at keeping a fund credit positive or not deteriorating it. Analogously, nominal fixed income is not the risk-free asset when inflation-linked income is what we're targeting at retirement. So only in this instance would the right inflation-linked bond portfolio of hedged Robert, and he would have maintained at least 10,000 rands worth of income when he retired.